Hello YouTubers, this is the Gold Standard 0924 coming at you with another video. So this is going to be yet another WrestleMania related review. So to kind of wrap up the Attitude Era, we review WrestleMania 17. So this pay-per-view, just childhood favorite. I remember ordering this pay-per-view when I was a kid, watching it when it originally aired. Yeah, it was a really great pay-per-view from what I remembered. Even rewatching it again, it really holds the test of time. Yeah, so this is pretty much one of the most stacked cards out of all the WrestleManias. So there's basically like 11 matches on the card. Although technically 9 out of the 11 matches, because the two of the other matches were just kind of like intermission matches that didn't last 5 minutes or so. But other than that, 17, just a very stacked card from top to bottom. Not just the main event, but a lot of the other undercard matches as well. So I'm going to kind of get down to this video right now. So just really childhood favorite of mine. Yeah, there hasn't really been a lot of WrestleManias that came close to this in recent years. But this really showcased, what WWE had as far as, what the talent that they provided at the time. So, yeah, let's get started. So we have is the Intercontinental title on the line. So we have the champion Chris Jericho defending the belt against William Regal. This is actually a pretty good match. Just seeing these two technically sound wrestlers competing against each other. There's a few rest holds here along the way. The match didn't last very long, and surprisingly, Jericho won with the Lion Salt. And normally he uses the walls of Jericho to make his opponents submit. But William Regal fought out of it. And so Jericho, won with the Lion Salt and basically retained the IC title. So this is actually a pretty enjoyable match, really good way to open up the card. Yeah, I do remember a bit of the build-up behind all this because, around this time, William Regal had become a commissioner. So apparently, Vince McMahon had fired Mick Foley, and then they did this sort of contest where, William Regal and Al Snow were fighting over to determine who could be the WWE commissioner. So apparently William Regal won that match and became or was hired as a commissioner. So apparently as a commissioner you're like booking matches in advance or basically at the last moment on Raw or SmackDown you're just basically going out there, you're keeping tabs on a lot of these wrestlers when you're live, and yeah, you're just basically booking matches. And apparently there was like one segment where Chris Jericho urinated on William Regal's teacup, and apparently William Regal actually took a sip of it, but he didn't realize it was a urine. So apparently William Regal was like so pissed off. So yeah, that was like one of the few memories I had during the Jericho Regal feud, and it was pretty sickening. But not the feud itself, but just the way that Regal tasted urine. But yeah, it was pretty sick looking back. But that was pretty hilarious in some parts. Especially a little bit of build up here. But nonetheless, I really enjoyed the match itself. It was pretty short, but still a pretty fun match. Fun opener for that matter. So Jericho retained the Intercontinental title. Then we have the next match. We have the right to Censor taking on the APA and Tazz. This was pretty much a short 6-man tag team match. This was also Bradshaw's hometown, and Jacqueline. So apparently APA they were a tag team and they were teaming with Tazz. Tazz had turned babyface around this time, and they were feuding with Right to Censor. So basically around this time, Right to Censor was created in response to the criticism that the WWF got from the Parent Television Council. And apparently because WWE aired SmackDown on a broadcast television station like UPN. Apparently, they got in trouble for that, and there was like some restrictions between like broadcast television networks and basic cable television networks. When Raw aired on USA, they're allowed to get away with a lot of cuss words and a lot of profanity, whereas a network station like a UPN or CBS or ABC tend to be pretty strict when it comes to censorship. So apparently, some of the Attitude Era characters like Godfather and some wrestlers as well, like Val Venus, were kind of criticized by their gimmicks, and Godfather promoting these hoes or these hookers that come out in these clubs. So apparently, so they had this WWE kind of got inspired to create this stable called Right to Censor, which was led by Steven Richards. So basically, he brings in Bull Buchanan, and then the Godfather followed suit and got repackaged as the Good Father, and then Val Venus joined and Ivory joined. So basically, Right to Censor. That's basically what you got. So basically, this was a pretty short match, like I said. Bradshaw got the pin after he nailed the clothesline from hell. So Tazz and the APA won that match. And this was pretty much the beginning of the end for Right to Censor, because not long after this, there's like a lot of dissension going on. And then by the time the invasion angle kicked in, the Right to Censor had disbanded. Val Venus, I think he suffered from an injury. And then I guess Godfather and Bo Buchanan all left because of the invasion angle, and bringing all these stars from these other companies. So apparently they weren't able to get a lot of TV time. So Steven Richards and Ivory, the only Right to Censor members that took part in the Alliance angle, and and basically joined the actual stable there. But other than that, this was basically the end of Right to Censor here. So Tazz and the APA won the match, and it was a pretty okay match. Nothing terrible. Just a match just to pass the time. And then we have is the triple threat match for the Hardcore title. So you have the Raven coming in as the champion, defending the belt against the Big Show and Kane. This is actually a really fun match. Pretty short, but still pretty fun. This is a step up, in my opinion, from the Hardcore Battle Royal from the previous WrestleMania. So apparently, the Hardcore title, it was still under the 24/7 rule. But unlike last year's, where the belts were changing hands at the same pay-per-view, they only changed once in WrestleMania 17. So apparently, Raven and Kane started brawling first, and then Big Show came out, and they were using weapons here and there, and they mostly fought backstage. There was like a moment where I believe Kane threw Raven over the glass window, and then Big Show and Kane were kind of duking at it. They fought in the locker room. They destroyed like the wall of the locker room. And there was like a couple moments where I think Kane was like riding a golf cart, which was pretty hilarious. There was like a lot of back and forth here and there, a couple objects used along the way. And then they fought back, they fought back in the arena or the stadium. So apparently, they were fighting on stage, and then Big Show and Raven, they fell down off the stage, and then Kane went for a leg drop and got the pinfall. So apparently Kane became the new Hardcore champion. This is actually a pretty fun match. Like I said, it was pretty short, but sometimes, short matches tend to be a lot enjoyable than matches that drag on for unnecessary time limits. But just actually a really good match. Nothing really to elaborate on, so Kane becomes the new Hardcore champion. Then we have is for the European title. We have the champion Test defending the belt against Eddie Guerrero. It's really a shame. Two of these guys, aren't around anymore. Rest in peace Test. Rest in peace Eddie Guerrero. Yeah, so I mean, this was actually a pretty average match. Just at least there was some build up behind this whole thing. So like there was like a match on Raw where I believe Tess was fighting Albert at the time, and then like Eddie Guerrero was the special guest referee. So there was a lot of controversy that went on, and Tess, Eddie Guerrero screwed Tess in the match. So apparently this kind of built up Tess and Eddie for the European title. So they were going at it for a little while. And this wasn't a very long match. The Radicals interfered along the way. Tess trying to fend off Perry Saturn and Dean Malenko. And basically, Eddie Guerrero used the European title belt and clubbed it on the Tess. So apparently Eddie Guerrero became the European champion. So, yeah, I mean, it's a pretty average match. It's still pretty tolerable. I mean, nothing too spectacular, but nothing too terrible either. Eddie Guerrero, had turned heel. Eddie and Chyna were pretty over in 2000, and then there was like a fallout between Eddie and Chyna. So apparently Eddie turned heel and then started to align with the Radicals, and they reunited. So, yeah, I mean, Radicals, definitely a stable that could have ran longer than it did. But, they've had this sort of short span where they were together, then they split apart, and then they got back together again. And, it just never really had a proper run. And, yeah, it's really a shame that the stable wasn't utilized to its full potential. But nonetheless, just a pretty average match. Fun, it's a pretty fun match a little bit. I won't say it's as good as the hardcore title match, but this was okay. So there you have it, that. And then we have is the fifth match, and perhaps the match that's really started where the quality of the show started to kick things off. So we have Kurt Angle taking on Chris Benoit. This is a good match. It's kind of a shame, because this match won't be remembered because of what Chris Benoit did. So apparently, they went at it. The match started off with a few wrestling holds here and there. A lot of amateur wrestling to kind of start things off. There was a lot of attempts where Benoit tried to go for a crossface, but Kurt Angle either tried to reach for the ropes or he tried to counter it. And there was so they were basically stealing each other's finishers at some point in the match. Like Kurt Angle tried to go for the crossface at one point, and then like Chris Benoit had like an ankle lock. So there was like a lot of back and forth going on. Kurt Angle went for like a moonsault, but then like I don't know, it was kind of confusing because of the camera angle, because it seemed like Kurt Angle was trying to successfully connect with the moonsault, but it looked like Benoit sort of used his knees to kind of use it as a shield, or Kurt Angle just kind of botched and missed on purpose. Not sure what had happened, but nonetheless, Benoit went for a diving headbutt, which connected, but Kurt Angle kicked out of that. So apparently, Kurt Angle went for an angle slam, and Benoit kicked out once again. And it took a little while before, Benoit went for yet another crossface, and then Kurt Angle reversed it into a roll-up. So Kurt Angle went over Chris Benoit. This is actually a pretty good match. Granted, they've had better encounters. It's really a shame that this feud and this match won't be remembered because of Chris Benoit's actions. So it's understandable why WWE won't mention Chris Benoit. But I mean, nonetheless, it's still a pretty good match. Enjoyable time watching it. So yeah, there you have it. That. And then we have is the women's title match. We have the champion Ivory taking on Chyna. This match was kind of more of an intermission. This feud has been building up since the tail end of 2000, and and apparently there was like an episode of Raw or SmackDown where the Right to Censor did like a double team pile driver on Chyna, and then she started to have like neck injury. So apparently, Chyna was taken out of action for a couple weeks, and then Ivory and Chyna had this sort of build up from the Royal Rumble. And apparently Chyna went for like a cartwheel elbow that she did. And then before it could connect, Chyna eventually collapsed. And the match, had to end prematurely, so Ivory ended up retaining the women's title. This is basically a rematch from the Royal Rumble. I think the thing with a lot of these undercard matches back then, I mean, they actually had some sort of build up looking back. They had at least some sort of storyline or motivation as to why this match is occurring at a pay-per-view. Because nowadays, WWE would just randomly throw in a match just to pass the time. They just treat like a lot of their undercard matches like a Divas title match or something. And even though this is actually for a women's title belt, I mean, it did actually have some sort of build up. And even though the women's wrestling in the Attitude Era wasn't really known for their athleticism necessarily, but more of sex appeal. But Ivory and Chyna, these two wrestlers were actually had some sort of heated rivalry going on at the time, and you can't really say much with that with today. And it's really a shame. But Chyna eventually squashed Ivory and eventually won the women's title. So it's not a match that was basically over before it began. I mean, like I said, it was a squash match, and just a pretty okay match. Like I said, this was basically the beginning of the end of Right to Censor. I mean, the build-up was a little bit hilarious because Ivory was fighting like a cardboard Chyna. I guess it's more stupid than hilarious, but nonetheless, I mean, even though it did have some stupid build-up here and there, but nonetheless, I mean, at least it had a reason to exist, or at least a reason to have this sort of feud, So nonetheless, Chyna went over Ivory and winning the women's title. Then we have is the street fight between father and son. So we have Vince McMahon taking on Shane McMahon. And, this also had Mick Foley as the special guest referee. This is a really great match. There was build-up going on between Vince and Shane because around this time, Vince McMahon, started to question Mick Foley's booking decisions. And, Mick Foley, was the commissioner around, like, the summer and fall of 2000. So, eventually, Vince McMahon, like I said, was starting to really question Mick Foley. And it got to the point where Vince McMahon fired Mick Foley as the commissioner. And then, Linda McMahon stepped up. She was the CEO. I mean, she was responsible for hiring Mick Foley under the commissioner spot. So, apparently, Vince and Linda had this sort of falling out. And then this got to the point where Vince said in a promo that he wanted a divorce. So eventually, Linda started to cry. And then the next time she showed up, she was, sitting in a wheelchair, having this sort of nervous breakdown. So eventually, Shane McMahon, hadn't appeared on television for a couple months now. And apparently came back as a babyface. And started to defend his mother. So eventually, that kind of goes on, and then like the week before WrestleMania 17, the WCW aired its last program, aired the last Nitro, and Shane McMahon had Shane and Vince had this sort of simulcast where Shane McMahon announced that he purchased WCW. So, they kind of used that as a way to advance the Shane-Vince feud. So, you had the street fight. For what it was actually really enjoyable. Especially, for these two guys that were more known for being on-screen authority figures as opposed to actual wrestlers. Stephanie McMahon and Trish Stratus accompanied Vince McMahon. And, and so basically Shane, yeah, so basically Shane McMahon was on his own, and Linda McMahon was carried out with a wheelchair. Um, yeah, so there was like a lot of back and forth, and a lot of weapons being used. Um, and there was like also a little cat fight going on with Trish Stratus and Stephanie. Um, let's see what I can remember. So and there was like a spot where Shane McMahon like went for an elbow to the announce table. Um, let's see. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm just kind of losing my train of thought here. So so eventually, Trish Stratus turned on Vince McMahon, and I think she like slapped Vince, and then basically left the arena. So that kind of left Stephanie McMahon. Um, and then at some point during the match, Vince McMahon dragged Linda into the ring, and and Linda had to watch Vince McMahon beating up their son. So eventually, while all that's going on, Linda McMahon actually low blowed Vince McMahon, and then Shane McMahon just nailed the final blow with the coast to coast drop kick onto the trash can, and basically pinned Vince McMahon and won. Shane McMahon won the match. So yeah, this is actually a really enjoyable match. And then Linda and Shane hug at the end. Yes, like I said, just a really fun match. So then we get to the TLC match for the tag team titles. We have the Dudley Boyz going in as the champions, defending their belts against the Hardy Boys along with Edge and Christian. So this is basically a rematch from the previous two. So the previous WrestleMania, you had the Triangle Ladder match. The second encounter, you had the first TLC match at SummerSlam. And then you have the second TLC at WrestleMania 17. So, yeah, this is basically their third encounter. Although this is like the second time they dubbed this as a tables, ladders, and chairs. So apparently, yeah, so this is, like I said, a rematch. Match that, a lot of people talk about. And it's actually a really great match from what I remembered. Yeah, granted, this was a lot of spot fest compared to the previous one. So apparently there were some spots where, like, I remember like, Jeff Hardy did like a swanton bomb off a ladder through, one or two announce tables. Just a really great match. Then you had, a lot of these interference coming out. Lita came out and whacked a lot, whacked some of Edge and Christian. I believe it was Edge and Christian or the Dudleys, but yeah, they came, she came out and whacked a lot of the wrestlers with the steel chair. Spike Dudley came out as well, representing Edge and Christian. Spike Dudley represented the Dudley Boys, excuse me, and Rhino represented Edge and Christian. So both those guys came out as well. Yeah, and there was like one where like Spike Dudley, tried to go for a Dudley dog, but then he got shoved in the announce table. So I mean, just a lot. Like I said, it's pretty much a spot fest. I know I mentioned in my last video that I sort of complained that there were too many spot fests in WrestleMania 17. But I mean, it was still good for what it was. I do think this match can get a little overrated. Not that it's a bad thing, because like I said, I really enjoyed this match as well. It does get highly praised. This is perhaps the best tag team match at a WrestleMania that WWE has done to this day. So eventually, everyone remembers the spot where Edge did that spear on Jeff Hardy. Yeah, when Jeff Hardy was holding the tag belts and he was just hanging almost on the rafters. Yeah, so that was a spot that a lot of people remember. And eventually, Rhino helped Edge and Christian and won the tag team titles. So, yeah, this is basically deja vu from last year's WrestleMania. Because, you had the Dudleys going in as champions, like in the previous WrestleMania. And then, like, the victor came out with Edge and Christian winning the tag belts on 2 consecutive WrestleManias. So yeah, this is basically deja vu. But nonetheless, still a pretty great match. I kind of preferred the ladder match from WrestleMania 2000 a little more, but I know it's just gonna be, that's just personally my opinion. Um, but still a great match for what it was. Then we have a gimmick battle royal. Nothing really to elaborate on. I mean, this is just kind of a intermission to kind of quiet the audience after going through like a lot of these marquee matches, with the gimmicks. So eventually, you started seeing all these old legends back in the WWE again, or at least for like one night. Yeah, you had like Mean Gene coming back after being in WCW since he left the WF in like 1993, and then he came back at WrestleMania 17. And then Bobby the Brain Heenan also came back from WCW. So yeah, they provide some commentary throughout the match. Just a lot of these past, just a lot of these past wrestlers coming back. With like Doink the Clown and Iron Sheik. There are a lot of other guys as well. But eventually, the match then ran too long. So the Iron Sheik ended up winning the Battle Royal. So it was kind of a match that was kind of there. So I'm not going to necessarily rate it. But just something to kind of, nothing really to take seriously of, since there was no build up to it. Or at least no build up that I can really remember. But just, like I said, just basically intermission. I mean, just to kind of quiet the audience down, just to kind of just give them a breathing room after sitting through a lot of these gimmick matches. So there you have it with the gimmick battle royal. And then you have are the double header main events. So you have the Undertaker taking on Triple H. Yeah, this is actually a really great match. Unfortunately, WWE doesn't want to mention it, or they rather mention their 27-28 match. But I personally thought their 17 match, it was more superior than the other two matches that they had in recent years. And not that they're saying they're bad, but I do think they can be a little overrated. But Undertaker Triple H here, yeah, just a very great match. Apparently, the build up was kind of so-so. Apparently, Triple H had beaten Stone Cold despite Stone Cold being the winner of the Royal Rumble and going on to face the WWF champion at WrestleMania, that is. So eventually, Triple H said that he's destroyed every one of your fallen heroes, and then Undertaker stepped in and tried to call out on his BS. So eventually, there were a lot of segments where Undertaker had to get arrested, and Triple H was destroying Undertaker's motorbike. Basically Undertaker around this time came back as the American Badass. So apparently he ditched his, he ditched a lot of his dark side gimmicks, where he was like more this guy that was just brooding and didn't really talk a whole lot, or just doing a lot of satanic sort of stuff that was, that was basically what he was known for in the 90s. So apparently Undertaker came back, as just like a normal human being, and just riding a motorcycle and riding a Harley, So basically, yeah, Undertaker just basically retooled himself as the American Badass with the biker gimmick. Yeah, so I mean the build-up was a little silly at times. I remember like some segment where Undertaker got arrested, and Undertaker asked the police officers if he wanted a piece of donut, which was kind of hilarious. But like I said, the build up to the feud was a little silly along at times. But eventually, this culminated into a match for WrestleMania. Yeah, so I mean, this was actually a pretty great match. There was like a little ref bump during the beginning of the match. So Undertaker and Triple H were brawling all over the stadium. I remember like they were fighting in the scaffold, and then I think there was like a spot where like Undertaker did like an aerial attack off the stage, and then Undertaker and Triple H eventually went back to the ring. Apparently, for whatever reason, the referee was knocked out throughout like a quarter of the match, or at least mostly like the first half of the match. But eventually, Undertaker and Triple H, they went back to the ring. They went at it. Yeah, there was like a moment where Undertaker tried to go for a last ride, but then Triple H clubbed Undertaker with a sledgehammer. So apparently, yeah, Undertaker had collapsed before he could do the last ride. So apparently, Triple H went for a cover, then Undertaker kicked out. Undertaker, I think, went for a tombstone, and then Triple H kicked out. Yeah, just a few near falls along the way. And then, Triple H and Undertaker were at the corner. Triple H was going for a series of punches, and then Undertaker no-sold it and just basically countered into a last ride powerbomb. So he went for the pinfall. Undertaker won the match. Excuse me. So Undertaker, still on a WrestleMania winning streak. But back then, they didn't really acknowledge Undertaker was on a winning streak. They said that Undertaker was never defeated. But it wasn't until WrestleMania 18 the following year that, from that point onwards, that they were starting to emphasize more on Undertaker's streak and how symbolic and important it was, or it is today. So Undertaker, went over Triple H. So this is actually a really great match, but WWE doesn't mention it as much now. Especially, they rather remember a lot of their recent matches with 27 and 28 and, the Hell in a Cell match. But I always liked, Undertaker Triple H from the WrestleMania 17, it just felt very action-packed, I mean, there wasn't, like, a lot of stare-offs or a lot of standoffs like their recent WrestleMania matches, but I actually liked the 17 match a little more. Just very straightforward and very fun to watch looking back on it. So Undertaker went over Triple H. Pretty great match. And then we have is the main event, and this was actually a no DQ match for the WWF title. So you have The Rock defending his WWF title from Stone Cold Steve Austin. So apparently Stone Cold, around Survivor Series 99, he was taking time off to undergo neck surgery. And to kind of write him off, they had Stone Cold getting run down. And eventually, this became a storyline going into 2000. And eventually by the end of 2000, Stone Cold came back, and, they were doing this sort of angle where they were finding out who ran over Stone Cold. And initially, it turned out to be Rikishi that ran over Stone Cold, but then later on, it was revealed that Triple H was the instigator that started this whole conspiracy. Him and Rikishi. Stone Cold, just came back, and while Stone Cold, was gone for most of 2000, Rock was on top, winning the WWF title. Having a pretty good run with it throughout the summer and a little bit in the fall. So eventually, there was like one title change where Kurt Angle won the belt, and then Rock won it back at No Way Out. And then, Stone Cold go on to win the Royal Rumble in 2001. So eventually this kind of culminated into this sort of match. This was actually a really great match. Just the build up, the hype, the video package, with Limp Bizkit's My Way, just made everything so epic, and it kind of really felt like a be all end all to like a lot of these matches, and it just got you, this song just got you hooked, and like, oh my god, this pay-per-view's gotta be good, let me check this out. So I know a lot of people, just shit on Limp Bizkit and stuff. They were a pretty popular band at the time. They're still together, but they're not as big as they used to be. So eventually, their song was kind of used for the WrestleMania 17 pay-per-view, as well as, the video package for the Rock Austin feud. They really did a great job with the video package. And so, you have the actual match. I only got to see like the first 10, 15 matches when I was a kid. because basically I had curfew at the time, so school would have to start the next day. So unfortunately, I couldn't sleep in to watch the main event of the match. So which was kind of unfortunate. It wasn't until several years later that I started to rewatch the match in its entirety. This was actually a really great back and forth match. Um, I did like the Stone Cold had offense here and there, and as well as The Rock. Stone Cold clubbed The Rock with the ring bell. The match was just it was just basically like almost a bloodbath, and it really was one of the things that kind of really made the match stand out. And there were some spots where Stone Cold was paying tribute to a lot of these wrestlers that either he's affiliated with or has feuded with in the past. So there was a notable spot where Stone Cold went for $1 Million Dream, which was basically Ted DiBiase's finishing move, but it was also Stone Cold's finishing move during his early years as the ringmaster. And then there was like another one where he did a sharpshooter to kind of pay tribute to his classic feud with Bret Hart, since it was Bret Hart's finishing move. So this is actually great back and forth, a little bit of good mix of hardcore action and in ring, just the in ring wrestling match. And then like sometime throughout the match, Vince McMahon came out. No one knew why he was there. And then there was like one where Stone Cold used the Rock Bottom against The Rock, but Rock kicked out. So eventually Vince McMahon and Stone Cold turned out that they were in cahoots, and they were both ganging up on The Rock. And Stone Cold went for a stunner on The Rock, and then Rock kicked out. Stone Cold got shocked, as well as Vince McMahon. So apparently, they were still double teaming on The Rock, and it took like a lot. He just pretty much annihilated Rock with a lot of steel chair shots. And eventually, Stone Cold went for the cover and won the WWF title there. So this is actually a really great match. I think the ending kind of took away from it. I didn't even, like I said, I didn't watch the entire match during its initial airing, but I do remember waking up the next morning because I had to go to school, and I had my cousin who was also a wrestling fan, and he was a buddy patrol. So we used to go to his house before we went to the same school that we attended, and my cousin told me that Stone Cold had turned heel, and he didn't say turn heel, but Stone Cold turned bad, as in a bad guy. So eventually, this is before I knew what a babyface and what a heel was. I was aware of wrestling dirt sheets because my sister, also a wrestling fan, looked in some of these wrestling dirt sheets at the time. But I didn't really care for those. But yeah, when I heard my cousin say that Stone Cold had aligned himself with Vince McMahon, it was like I was kind of like shocked, as a kid. It was like, why, Austin? Why? I was like, it wasn't until I watched the Raw the next night, just to be curious. But a lot of people thought that Stone Cold, Stone Cold was still the same Stone Cold, that it didn't mean anything personal. But then the steel cage match, they did a rematch after WrestleMania 17 with Austin and Rock in the cage. So eventually, Stone Cold, they were still going through that heel turn, and Triple H came out, and then we all thought Triple H was going to turn out to be a babyface, because Austin's alliance with Vince McMahon and Triple H feeling betrayed, but turns out to be a ruse. Triple H turned on The Rock again, and then they did this whole two-man power trip. Which was just really weird looking back on it, just very forced, especially, knowing the heated rivalry between Stone Cold and Triple H. But I know I apologize if I'm getting a little off subject, but this is basically the peak of Stone Cold and The Rock. Stone Cold, when he turned heel, he just wasn't the same. and then they turned him back face during the Alliance angle. Then he turned back into a heel and became the leader and feuding with Kurt Angle. And then once the Alliance angle ended, Stone Cold turned face again, even though despite the fact that he ended up betraying his own company that made him, and then all of a sudden he's a babyface again. So yeah, so basically after that, with the constant babyface heel turns, Stone Cold just wasn't the same again. And then by the summer of 2002, Stone Cold just, walked out of the company. And yeah, basically 2002 just wasn't really a strong year for Austin. Yeah, so I think this kind of traces back to WrestleMania 17. It's just Stone Cold's downfall here. Basically, after this match, I mean, yeah, he's had a pretty good match with Kurt Angle, but other than that, it just wasn't the same Stone Cold. And as for The Rock, yeah, he had to shoot a movie, with the Scorpion King. So yeah, he had to take time off throughout the spring and summer, and then he came back. Yeah, he came back towards the end of the summer actually with SummerSlam. But it's just really the peak years for Rock and Austin. Yeah, I mean it's just like I said, just a really great match. But this was also the beginning of the end. So I mean, I apologize if I'm being speechless here. So yeah, this is really my overall thoughts on WrestleMania 17. Just a really great card from top to bottom. Nothing necessarily too terrible, or at least anything that pissed me off. You had only like maybe 2 matches that were just kind of there, or at least 3 matches. You had like the Right to Censor match. Test Eddie was alright. Ivory and Chyna was just basically a squash match. I guess Gimmick Battle Royal sort of counts, so that makes it 4. But that's not really anything to take seriously of. But for the most part, this card, was very consistent, very enjoyable card. If you haven't watched WrestleMania 17, I highly recommend it. Just a really great card. I know this pay-per-view does tend to get overrated, and it gets praised a little too much than it does. But at the same time, just a very enjoyable WrestleMania pay-per-view I remember watching growing up. Yeah, just really remember it like yesterday. Yeah, so that's basically my review for WrestleMania 17. Just a really great card, and the main event really delivered. Yeah, that's really all I could really elaborate from here on out. So that's basically it for this video. Thank you all for watching. Yeah, so so yeah, this is basically it for this video, and until next time, this is the Gold Standard 0924 signing out.